July 1518. Strasbourg, in what is now France. A woman named Frau Trophia walks out of her house. She doesn't say a word. She just starts dancing. Alone. In the middle of the street. Her husband watches. Confused. Then concerned. She doesn't stop when the sun goes down. She doesn't stop when her feet start to bleed. She doesn't stop when she collapses from exhaustion only to get up and dance again. By the end of the first week, she had been joined by 34 others. By the end of the month, over 400 people were dancing uncontrollably through the streets of Strasbourg. And they were dying. This wasn't a celebration. This wasn't a festival. These people were suffering. Their feet were torn open. Their bodies were exhausted. Several collapsed from heart attacks and strokes brought on by sheer physical overexertion. Historical accounts estimate that at the peak up to 15 people were dying every single day. And yet, they could not stop. Eyewitness reports from the time describe men and women weeping, begging, screaming, and still dancing. Their faces showed no joy. Only agony. The City Council of Strasbourg was baffled. They called in physicians. The physicians examined the dancers and gave their professional diagnosis. Hot blood. Their solution? Build a stage. Hire musicians. Keep the dancers moving day and night, because surely, the physicians reasoned, the only cure for too much dancing was more dancing. They were wrong. People died faster. After weeks of chaos, the city tried a different approach. They banned music, shut down the stage, and transported the most severely affected dancers to a mountaintop shrine where they were given red shoes blessed by a priest. Within days, the dancing finally stopped. To this day, nobody fully understands why it started. To understand the dancing plague, you need to understand who these people were. Strasbourg in 1518 was a city under siege, not by an army, but by suffering. The previous years had brought devastating famine. Crops had failed. Diseases had swept through the population. People were dying of starvation in the streets. The poor, who made up the vast majority of those affected by the dancing, lived in a state of constant terror and despair. Many historians believe this context is crucial. Frau Trophia and those who joined her were not simply random citizens. They were, by most accounts, among the poorest and most desperate people in the city. And Strasbourg had a specific cultural belief system that made mass dancing feel not just possible but inevitable in a moment of collective crisis. There was a regional legend of Saint Vitus, a Christian martyr who was believed to have the power to curse the sinful with uncontrollable, fatal dancing. The people of Strasbourg believed this curse was real. They had grown up hearing about it. They feared it. Some historians argue they had been psychologically primed for it. And when one desperate, traumatized woman began dancing in the street, the curse, in their minds, had arrived. So what actually happened? Over the centuries, historians, physicians, and psychologists have offered several theories. Theory 1, ergot poisoning. Some scientists suggest the dancers may have consumed grain infected with ergot, a fungus that contains compounds chemically similar to LSD. Ergot poisoning can cause hallucinations, muscle spasms, and violent convulsions. But here's the problem: ergot poisoning typically causes victims to collapse, not dance in coordinated groups for weeks on end. Theory 2, epilepsy or encephalitis. A brain infection or neurological condition spreading through the population? Possible, but no evidence of a wider disease outbreak was recorded. Theory 3, and the one most historians find most compelling. Mass psychogenic illness. Also known as mass hysteria. This is a real, documented medical phenomenon where psychological stress so extreme, so overwhelming, that it manifests as physical symptoms and spreads from person to person like a contagion. Not through bacteria. Not through a virus. Through belief. Through fear. Through the shared trauma of an entire community pushed past its breaking point. The body, when the mind cannot cope, finds another way to scream. And in 1518 Strasbourg, it screamed through dancing. The dancing plague of 1518 was not the first and not the last of its kind. Similar episodes were recorded across medieval Europe. In 1374, mass dancing outbreaks swept through multiple cities along the Rhine River. In 1237, a group of children reportedly danced all the way from Erfurt to Arnstadt, some dropping dead along the way. And mass psychogenic illness did not die with the Middle Ages. In 2011, in Leroy, New York, a group of teenage girls began experiencing uncontrollable twitching, verbal outbursts, and seizures. Medical tests found nothing wrong with them physically. Eventually, the diagnosis was confirmed: mass psychogenic illness. In 2012, a similar outbreak struck a school in Sri Lanka. These events still happen. They just look different now. Because the trigger is always the same: unbearable, unprocessed collective stress looking for a way out. The body doesn't lie. When a community is suffering and nobody is listening, it finds a way to make the suffering visible. Frau Trofia, the woman who started it all, was taken away by her husband after 6 days. History does not record what happened to her after that. We don't know if she survived. We don't know if she ever danced again. What we do know is this: she was a poor woman, living in a city crushed by hunger and disease. A woman with no power, no voice, and no way to express her suffering. And then one day, she walked outside. And she danced. Whether the curse of Saint Vitus took her, or whether her mind simply fractured under the weight of a world that had become unlivable, we will never know. But 400 people followed her. 400 people understood something, in their bodies, that they could not say with words. That is the dancing plague of 1518. A tragedy. A mystery. And one of the most haunting true stories in all of human history.